God came to us to seek and to save that which was lost. He raised a man from among us. He, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, laid the foundation. What I'm doing is something that comes from him through me, and the thing that he uses in me to do the work is my faith in him and the word that he taught. To produce men and women who wanted to clean up their life and build an independent nation for the glory of God.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is your Brother Willie Muhammad, and I'm your host of I Have a Testimony. We thank each and every one of you all for your continued support, for your feedback that you've been leaving, and just telling us about how much you enjoy the actual broadcast. Today, we have a brother who is the first-time guest on this show, but he's not familiar to any of you all, especially if you read the greatest newspaper on the planet Earth, the Final Call newspaper. So if you don't know who he is, we're going to get ready to bring our brother up, Brother Brian E. Muhammad, who is a member of he's a writer for the Final Call news staff. So, assalamu alaikum, my brother.
Wa alaikum salam, Brother Willie.
Hey, man, we thank you for providing us the opportunity to have you as a guest on our show.
Yes, sir. Listen, I'm so honored to be here. You know, shows like this, particularly the work that you've been doing in featuring the members of the Nation of Islam and to tell their stories, it's very important, you know, because the work of our Savior, Master Akbar Muhammad, you know, he came to lift the people up. And of course, when we talk about having a testimony, you know, this helps in the work because the people need to know, who are the people and where do they come from? And so anytime we have a chance to tell our stories or aspects of the effect of his coming on us, I think it's a good thing. And I thank you for the opportunity, brother.
Yes, sir. And I agree with you 1,000%. And, you know, especially in this day and time where we are starting to see the passing of some of our great ones, one of the benefits I see of these shows that believers are starting to do now, it gives us the opportunity to capture that history. So when those who begin to start wanting to put it in a book form, a documentary form, we can actually reach back to some of our own first person witnesses, right? Who were there, not somebody who read a book that somebody else wrote about us. No, these people were there. And so this is one of the benefits of this show. And another reason why I'm glad to have you on, because we're going to talk about some history. And before we get into talking about the history, let's hear a little bit about your history. Can you share with us, how did you first become aware of the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad?
Wow. Well, I, you know, of course, was heard of the Nation of Islam. I mean, as a child, I heard of the Nation of Islam. I heard of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And of course, you know, I've heard of Malcolm X. You know, we knew of Muhammad Ali. But it started for me in terms of the Nation of Islam as a freshman at Morgan State University. I had just moved to Baltimore. I'm from New York City, but I moved to Baltimore to go to school. And my very first semester, I'm walking on the campus, and there was a poster on a tree. This was February 1984. I'll never forget it. And it wasn't the actual poster for the event, but it was like a kind of like a student cardboard written out with the information written out on the poster about this event. And the event happens to be Savior's Day, 1984. But what struck me was all of these names. Kwame Ture, who I was familiar with because he had just spoken on the campus a few weeks before, this experience. Jesse Jackson, I don't know if Jesse's name was on there, but there was quite a few names of Black figures that was pretty known as activists and as, people who are on the front lines for our people. I saw the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's name, but I didn't recognize the name. It was like a distant, how you see something, it's like I think I heard of that name, but didn't really know. But to make a long story short, I couldn't believe that all these people were going to be in one place at one time. I couldn't believe it. It was an impossibility. So the office, they had an office number. And so I went to the office to inquire about this event. And it happened to be the Department of Communications at Morgan State and the office of the director, who was a sister in the mosque, Sister Claudette Marie, not the famous Claudette Marie Muhammad that we know.
Okay.
But this was another Claudette Muhammad, rather, not Marie, but Muhammad, Claudette Muhammad. So Sister Claudette, she was the director of communications. She happened to also have been the MGT captain at that time of Muhammad's Mosque number 6. Now, I didn't know anything about all of that entering her office. But when I got into her office, I saw the actual poster of the handwritten thing that was on that tree out there, and other posters of Savior's Day, 80, 81, 82, I think 83. But anyway, so I inquired about it. And sure enough, this was Savior's Day convention, and just like today at our Savior's Days, we have workshops, on different aspects of our needs as a community and whatnot. And so, again, to make a long story short, she asked me. She said, "Well, this is happening in Chicago, Illinois," and this was like a couple of weeks away. Now, mind you, I just moved to Baltimore. And obviously, as a college student, I didn't have no money. So it wasn't like I can say, yeah, I'm going to get on a plane, I'm going. So she said, well, do you think you can make it? I said, well, no, I don't think I can go. But she brought back all of the tapes, the main lecture, Unity, More Powerful Than Nuclear Bombs was the lecture of Savior's Day that year. She brought me back all now for the young people out there. I forget that we may know something, Brother Woolley, about cassette tapes. Those are those little, just for the young people who may be watching. Those are some little plastic things that we record stuff on before the digital age, before all of that. And anyway, she brought back all the tapes of the workshops. And and she lent me a worn copy, very worn, well-read copy of Message to the Black Man, which I got into. I got into that book. I listened to all of the tapes. And in my heart of heart, I knew that this is where I needed to be. What struck me was first meeting her in her office and the level of dignity that she, expressed in her person. That was one thing. Then opening for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was, of course, Mother Tainetta Muhammad. Now, I didn't obviously, I didn't understand all that she said, but you can hear the dignity coming through. So I'm putting the math together as I'm listening to these tapes. And I'm saying, man, I knew of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. Not nothing substantial, but I knew that he was the teacher of Malcolm X. I knew that Muhammad Ali came through this. I knew very little about Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, although his followers was also working on Morgan State, in terms of propagating the faith, because it was still early at that time after the transition. So for the most part, some were still propagating in the way that we know that we need to, what we call fish. So they were on the campus. So I had some familiarity with them as well. But my logic, Brother Willie, was that if the most honorable Elijah Muhammad produced this powerhouse that I'm listening to named Louis Farrakhan. Now, mind you, this was the first time that I can recall hearing him. He produced Malcolm. He produced Muhammad Ali. Then, of course, Mother Tynetta, when I'm hearing, of course, the sister who was responsible for giving me all these tapes and that message to the black man to look into. I said, man. So in my heart of hearts, I knew this is where I needed to be. This is where I needed to be. And I guess you could say that the rest was history from there. But that's how I came in. That's how I,
So you got registered in a mosque in Baltimore, and you just were soldiering from there.
Okay. Well, no, it started there.
Okay.
It started there. But I wasn't the most disciplined of students. So I left, I quit college. Well, I'll put it like this. They say, tell the truth. As it was clear that I was not going to make it in college, do the right thing in college. My father, he was paying for my schooling there. He pulled the plug. He said, I'm not paying. If you ain't going to do this thing, then they don't need me putting out this tuition money. So you need to make a decision. You need to go, But he actually made the decision for me. Like, look, either do right or, And it was, but I mean, I was getting more and more involved in the nation, even though I was not yet registered. And believe me, anybody who was there was trying to steer me away from quitting school. Sister Claudette, she, again, as a professor and the director of the communications department, she knew the value of education, and others who were there. But I remember her saying specifically, she said, look, she said, you need to think about this, because the minister is going to need the educated in the future. He's going to need the educated ones in the future to build this nation. So you may want to think about, assess this decision. So again, history would tell it I left school. I can't blame the Nation of Islam. Even though in my mind, I couldn't really reconcile the high wisdom that I began to learn, because, when you first come in and you start hearing this high powered truth, it is so powerful, and really, I don't know if zealot is the right word for it, But you know that excitement that where you trying to teach everybody everything, and that's the way I was when I came in. Even though, again, history would say, well, you was trying to teach what you clearly didn't fully understand yourself, but the energy was there. And so I had I had to leave Baltimore, obviously, and go back home to New York and get a job and do the whole 9 yards. And I got involved in the mosque in New York, and that is where I actually registered.
Wow. Who was
grew up in?
Who was the student minister? Who was the minister in New York at that time? Was it Conrad or was it?
No. This was before Conrad. It was in transition because when I was at Morgan and I would come home on these little breaks. It was student minister Abdul Kareem.
Wow.
Muhammad. And I remember the first time I met him, because the first time I went to the mosque, it was overwhelming, because you're talking about a crowd of, I would estimate 500 or 600 people.
Wow.
We were meeting on in Brooklyn, on Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. And when you walked up, and first it was all the energy with the brothers and when you first come out of the subway train, because there was a subway train right across the street from the mosque. You come out and you can see the energy of all the Muslims, right? So that was one thing. Then I went up the stairs and it was packed. I mean, it was like, and I can remember the brother who was teaching, because again, I didn't know who was who. I didn't know about Kareem. I didn't know who was who, but who was up there teaching, and this was just part of his opening speakers. They were up there jamming, brother. I'll tell you who it was in a minute, but because Kareem was more of a, they affectionately call him the general.
The general.
Because Kareem was just that. He was not, what you call us. He didn't come off as a spiritual person. Like, he was spiritual, but he wasn't. He was. You touch one hair on Farrakhan's head and we'll, you know what I mean? He wasn't, so Kareem had all of these students in the ministry under him. And they were the ones that did all the teaching. And then when he came up, it was more of a rally to rally the people behind the support of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. But all of them did the teaching before he got on.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And so when I got up there, it was so packed, and it was a huge lecture hall. I remember that. And all I can see was the FOI hat. He's up there teaching, his head bopping, kind of, how you teaching, you animated, like, all I could see was his head, because he was a little short brother, but he was jamming. It happened to be Brother Wayne, who was the older brother of our current assistant supreme captain.
Wow.
That's right.
Wow.
And and we became kind of close, because as a young Muslim, there's always people, and I say this to anybody in your mosque, in mosques around the country, that there always should be people to look out for the young, the young and the new. And he was that for me, Brother Wayne, their mother, Sister Rosetta, you know. They just, you know, they look out for people like myself who was new. And but he was up there teaching that day. And then afterwards, I met Brother Kareem, and Brother Kareem, the way he greets you, he always had a way of greeting you like he knew you all your life. Yeah. And he shook my hand, and the encouraging words that he said on the spot. See, these kind of things keeps a person, you know, it keeps you, because it makes you realize that no matter what, in the total scheme of things, you matter. You are somebody, you know. So Kareem was the initial teacher, but now again, I'm back and forth to school now. I didn't quit school yet. You know, that came later in that year. But by the time I got back to New York, where I actually, you know, moved back and kind of got on with other things than school, we had just received Brother Akbar Muhammad.
Ooh, you were there when Abdullah was there?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, yeah. And at that point, we were at a different location, not on Eastern Parkway, but we were now still in Brooklyn, but on Gates Avenue. Now, people who from New York know Brooklyn know what area I'm talking about, you know. And so it was really at that period that I had actually gotten that I registered, you know.
Brother Abdullah.
Yeah, that's right. And
What do
he
you?
was the
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was saying he was the minister. At that point, he was just moving to the city, you know. But man, brother, when I tell you, it was a blessing to be able to be with him, work under him, and, you know, learn some things, you know, but just his history alone, you know, and who he was in the cause. He brought a lot to us. And I have to say that I would be remiss if I didn't say I did not benefit from his presence in New York City.
Yeah, man. He one of the most profound teachers that I've heard. Is there any little special moment or anything, any history that you might can share about him? Because I still be trying to find people to see if they can have any of his lectures that are not on YouTube, because he's
right.
A teacher, brother.
Yeah. Well, man, you know, Abdullah was like real, just what you call, you know how you meet somebody, this one, he's just real.
Very practical too.
You know, and I can't say I remember anything like truly profound. Like, I don't have any profound lessons that I'm sure if I think hard enough. But I mean, I can remember him because he was full of humor, just a very humorous person. And he lived out in Hollis, Queens. We found him a home out in Hollis, Queens, where him and his family was living. And somehow he didn't have his car that day. And I was assigned to take him home from the mosque. Now, I lived in Queens, but, you know, in New York City, a lot of us who grew up in New York and came in the mosque young, you know, we were riding subway trains. You know, there's no shortage of public transportation in New York City, right? So even those people who don't have a driver's license, that didn't really was not number one in your mind because you can still get around 24 hours a day at that. In fact, I it's different for me when I'm in cities like in the city I live in now, where the public transportation shuts down at a certain time. It's like, wow, for real? Are you serious? But anyway, I was assigned to take him home. And somehow I got turned around in terms of getting him from the mosque into Hollis, Queens, where he was living. And he said, you know what, brother? He said, this is the only city where brothers take you around and don't know their own city, just get lost in the whole city. But he said it in such a way where it was like it hit, but he said it in such a humorous way. It hit you, but it didn't like break you. Like,
yeah.
You ain't walk away with a complex. The things he would say, but he was like that. But the high wisdom, man, it was like he was like a walking encyclopedia.
Yes, brother.
And those that knew him, in fact, when he returned to Allah, I was blessed to be the lead writer for, the fact that he passed away, the lead writer for the final call on Brother Abdullah. And being that I didn't know him so well that I can just put it down. I had to talk to a lot of people. And one brother who worked very closely with him, even before Brother Abdullah came fully back to help the minister in the rebuilding, he said to me, Brother Abdullah, no matter what conversation you have with him, will always bring back what he learned from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. No matter what they're talking about, he always segued to, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said this, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught that, no matter what subject they were talking about. So if you go back and look at that edition of the final call on Brother Abdullah's life at his passing, I think the headline inside the paper read, Islam was his life, something like that. And that came from that statement that a brother gave me of his interaction with Brother Abdullah. That's all he knew. That's all. Every reference point points back to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
I think they used to call him Islam John at one time.
Islam John, right? That's right. They used to call him Islam John, and he was a brilliant person. Here's somebody who graduated high school, I think at 15, and began to go to Howard University. I think it was Howard University at 15 or 16 or something like that, But he's a brilliant, this brilliant mind, and literally. But when I served with him, under him. I don't want to say with him. I'm not a companion of his. He's way out of my league, But I'm just saying, in the sense of, I worked under him. And then, of course, Brother Abdul Hafiz Muhammad, because when Brother when Minister Abdullah was brought to Chicago by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we were still now in this kind of interim. And Minister Abdul Hafiz, who was known at that time as Minister Kevin, he was the interim minister, but he was like an anchor who was always there no matter what New York went through in terms of leadership, he was always like an anchor there to hold it down and until the next one came. And and then eventually obviously he became the minister of New York City and the East Coast regional minister. But with him, we were close because I served as his driver, his security man, and we grew close. And he was like he was another one, just a walking vessel of knowledge, always ready to teach. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, forgive me if I am, but I think the minister at one time called him preacher man because of his, yes. And Hafiz, the name alone, his recall was.
I heard it. I heard that he knew the. I know he came in as a 5%, but he also knew the lessons by heart as well. Yes. And it's interesting to hear you being around from Brother Kareem, Brother Abdullah, Brother Hafiz, and then transitioning to Brother Akbar. How did you? Because that's when I first met you. You were here in the city with Brother Akbar. How did you begin to start? How did you meet Brother Akbar and begin to start working with him?
Yeah. Well, in New York City, I served on the staff of the secretarial department, and the brother who was the secretary of the mosque and the regional secretary at that time, his name is Brother Halim, but he was known at that time as Brother James Muhammad. Brother James Muhammad. And so he began to work with Brother Akbar. He began to help Brother Akbar, assist him, and so naturally, whenever Brother Akbar came to New York, it was a natural that Brother James would pull his staff to, to be those who are available to kind of help Brother Akbar with whatever Brother Akbar needed to get done. And so that's kind of how I began working around him. So Brother Akbar was going around at that time lifting the need to be involved in Africa, he became the international representative in 1989. And I would say it was around that time, 88, 89, that I began to work around him. And so being that he was talking about Africa, pushing Africa, he was doing trips, him and his first wife, Miriam Aziz, was bringing people back and forth to Africa. And so the curiosity for me for Africa was there. And so by 92, Brother Akbar was doing a trip, and I said, what? I think I want to go. I'm gonna go, and because I want to see this work. Like, I know the Nation of Islam in the United States, but Africa, and I didn't have Africa on my mind before then. Even working around him, I'm working around him because I'm on brother's staff, and it was like any young brother in the mosque, that this was another detail. It wasn't like I had Africa on my mind. It wasn't born from an interest in Africa. And so, but I began to think about things that he was talking about. And I said, I want to go and see. So I went on one of those trips. And that trip happened to be a very significant trip because on that trip had it was a former member of the New York Black Panther movement and member of the All African People Revolutionary Party. His name was David Brothers, older brother, passed on now. He was on that trip. The mother and sister of Kwame Ture, Mabel Carmichael, and his sister, they were on that trip in that delegation. And the trip took us to Egypt first and then on to Accra, Ghana. Kwame Ture was in Ghana when we got there. So the whole 10 days that I spent there, you know, it was around obviously Brother Akbar, Kwame Ture, you know, David Brothers, Kwame's mother, all of these people, you know, and it became a very significant trip, but it had an impact on me. It had an impact on me. And so by the time 1993 comes along, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan decided or agreed to hold Savior's Day in Accra, Ghana. And, you know, I always call it, I always describe it like it was the first Savior's Day outside of the borders of the United States.
That's a fact.
Yeah. Some of us refer to it as the first International Savior's Day, but I have issues with that language because the first International Savior's Day was actually 80 after 85. And it was a Savior's Day that we actually satellite live remarks
Muammar
Gaddafi. That was the first International Savior's Day. Then we had, and of course, he did it again at another Savior's Day later, along with President Jerry John Rawlings. Oh, there was, and I think Sani Abacha of Nigeria. See, so we've had International Savior's Days before the Accra, Ghana one. So I always say that Accra, Ghana was the first one outside of the borders of America.
That's
why we got to give credit to me. We got to give credit to the international stature of the minister long before 1994. You see?
Did you spend time with Brother Akbar in Africa when he was working to establish like a, I don't know, like I don't know if he was trying to do like a mosque or a study group there, or just the work he was doing? Were you there, and what did you witness?
Well, no, I got there. I went there in December. Now, remember, Brother Akbar was assigned there in 1989. And him and his wife, his family, you know, they moved there. I think by 1990, they were on the ground. So I was not there to witness the work that he put in on the ground. And you know, Brother Akbar, man, he raised up hundreds with little help, you know, and of the work he did on the ground. And so I didn't get there until 1993. And I went there December of 1993, basically to help and prepare for the Savior's Day, which was scheduled for October 1994. So I got there at that time. So I spent that whole year there. And it was a staff of 9 people on the ground who actually stayed in Ghana. I can't name everybody, but Sister Claudette Marie Muhammad, who was our national protocol person, she actually came and stayed for months there with us. Brother Akbar, Brother James, I was telling you about, and there was others. There was there was 9 of us who actually was on the ground working, and of course Brother Akbar's family, who was intricately involved in the success of Savior's Day happening, outside of the country like that.
What do you remember? Because that was historic for to have that Savior's Day outside of the country. Are there any memorable moments or things that we don't know that went into that, making that happen?
Ooh, well, Brother Willie, we have to talk about how things evolve. The Nation of Islam is a pulsating entity that is evolving. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is a living reality who is evolving. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we know he was an evolution because even in our lessons, how he at one point, he answered those lessons in the early to mid 1930s. Talking about the supreme wisdom lessons, questions and answers and information. But he said at about 40 years after that, if I can answer those same questions today, he could write volumes, right? So that means that he was evolving. Well, we have to assess the fact that having Savior's Day outside of the country, it was a learning curve because we are used to our work in the streets of America.
That's a fact.
And so we may not be thinking about what's happening in the barrios of South America or the favelas of Brazil. What's happening, in the Zongos of Africa. We're not thinking about that. So it was a learning curve, and that's why Brother Akbar had to go on the road. Years, a couple of years, a year in advance of going around educating the people, particularly the Nation of Islam itself. Because this was not part of a new reality. Now, during the time of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we did have outposts in different countries. It's not new. It's not a new thing. But again, now to really, in the rebuilding, we had to see the efficacy of why are we concerning ourselves with Africa or anywhere else.
I would imagine, like we talked about before we came on, you talked about the universal application. So when I hear people, when they go to different, like one time, Brother Nuri, when he went to go and speak in London, I asked him, how did he teach? Because I know, yes, it's Black people, but it's a different environment, different social issues to a large degree. So what did you see as it relates to the universal application of the teachings there in Ghana when you were there with Brother Akbar?
Well, first, that we are one people. We're one people. If you notice the language of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he he doesn't speak about the Black Haitian, the Black Jamaican, the Black Ghanaian, the Black Nigerian, the Black. He speaks about the Black man as the original man. And all of our people connected to that as the original people, the original family. So we have to recognize that we have to separate what was the medicine for our specific people here in the United States versus our people somewhere else. I don't care. Canada, you can go to Toronto. It may look a little like New York, but it ain't New York. They got a whole nother reality in Canada as another country, right? So the question comes, how do you take Islam, a universal religion, a universal way of life, and solve the problem or administer Islam as the balm of what may be happening with the people of China, whose issues may be a little different from the people of Jamaica and the people of, excuse me for too many syllables in this, New Orleans. I know y'all say it like one.
You got it right. You got
okay. it. Right? So how do you do that? See, Master Fard Muhammad, when he came before July 1930, when he publicly, made his
declaration.
Exactly. He was in and out for 20 years before then. And he traveled to every inhabited place on the earth. Well, what was he doing? But he had to make an assessment of the work, of the labor. He didn't just jump into labor and was like, here I am. He had to assess and make a diagnosis.
For 20 years.
For 20 years. See? So it's the same thing when you're in Ghana or in London or in any other place. You got to learn, you got to assess the people. And that's why it's not, it's the Holy Quran asked the question like this. And I'm paraphrasing, but do you wonder that a messenger is raised from among your own people? See? Because, first a messenger becomes the proof that what you're coming with actually can be effective to heal the people. See, I can live in Ghana as I did and work, but at the end of the day, somebody can easily accuse me. So, well, you ain't from here. You really don't know what we go through.
Gotta raise somebody up.
Exactly. You gotta raise somebody as a proof that, look, this works.
Were we able to do so? Were we able to have some believers over there? Are they still there now?
There are believers who are there now. There are believers who are still working now. See, so like I said, Brother Akbar raised up many. In fact, it takes being sensitive to the fact, again, that we are one people. A lot of times where we make a mistake is we try to speak to the circumstances of people rather than speak to their nature. See? So I don't, I couldn't be in Ghana and I'm going to put the brothers in suits and bow ties because that's a part of our expression. Just, see, we're living in a cultural reality here that we had to respond to in order to do our labor, in order to do our work. But you can't go to Ghana or anywhere else and try to make them into who you are.
Wow.
No, it took 400 years to become the personality that we know as the Black American.
Wow, that's beautiful.
But this is the thing that so when we talking about a universal mission, yes, we have to speak to conditions, but we cannot confuse cultural expression, and again, try to make them into who we are. So I was convinced that I wasn't in Ghana trying to become Ghanaian. And I wasn't there trying to make the Ghanaian into me. I got to allow, it's like a glass. If you take a glass, the picture is Master Akbar Muhammad and this supreme wisdom that we are this wisdom. But if Ghana is shaped like a glass, Jamaica is shaped like a bowl, another place is shaped like something else, you're pouring the water into each one of those vessels. It don't take on the shape of what you're pouring it from. It takes up a shape of its own to handle the shape that it's in.
Very good. And that's that what you said is profound, and that's why we have to get more information on people that have had those experiences, because it helps to break us out of this box that we in. And that's a part of, as the minister quotes from the Holy Quran, the expanding of Moses's untying the knot in his tongue and expanding of his breast. We only have about 8 more minutes left. I got to ask you this question in regards to, how did you start writing for the Final Call?
Oh man. Oh. Well, I wasn't a writer at first, because all those years that I worked with Brother Akbar, and I'm so sorry we ran out of time, because some of those experiences that we've had, and I've witnessed him, and I'm not the only brother. He mentored a lot of people, even though I've never heard him use the word mentor before. But he was a brother and a friend to a lot of us, and gave a lot of us these experiences. I mean, the World Friendship Tour that the minister allowed me to travel on with those countries, and the experience of helping Brother Akbar in that work, it was tremendous. I was not a writer at that time, so I didn't document any of that. But how I got into the Final Call, I was doing a podcast called the Sankofa Experience, and then later Global Peaks, and I used to have Brother Akbar Muhammad on, who was the former assistant editor of the Final Call, on all the time. And so one Savior's Day, I can't remember what year, but one Savior's Day, it was like, okay, well, why don't you report over to where the Final Call staff is meeting? So I'm not thinking anything. I went over, and Brother Naba, who was Brother Richard at the time, he's handing out assignments to all of the writers, and so I'm sitting there. He gets to me, and so he knew who I was, but he gives me an assignment to cover a workshop. Now I can do 2 things. I could be like, Brother Richard, I'm not a writer. I'm not here for that. I don't know. Or I could be like, yes, sir. And, you know, so it was a combination of both of those because he wouldn't take no for an answer. He sent me on my way. I didn't even have a laptop computer with me. So, you know, I was no writer. So anyway, that's how it started. One Savior's Day, I covered a workshop. And then I became, I started writing as a contributor writer for some years. And I remember my first cover story was Muammar Gaddafi's trip to the UN. His first trip, I think it was his first trip to the United States. And that was the cover story. And the rest was history from there. And then eventually a staff position opened up. And I'd never asked for any post in the Nation of Islam before, Brother Willie. Never. It kind of evolved, time and circumstances. I'm kind of like with Brother Akbar. It was time and circumstances. I never really asked for anything, you know. But for some reason, I when it opened up, I went to Brother Rich. I said, listen, I think I can do this. I would like to do it. And I thought he was going to hesitate. But he was like, no, come on. And he put me on. I've been a staff writer ever since, focused on international affairs. And again, the rest has been history.
And you mentioned there are two things. We may have to go over a little bit because you mentioned two things. I have to get this frame, but I want to add this. You talked about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has shared some feedback or whatever regarding you as a writer. Is there anything that you can share with us that he shared?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I had, during the time of COVID, what was the speech that the minister did? The major speech he did?
The Criterion.
The Criterion, thank you. And so we were writing on it, and he made a statement about Cuba, about letting the Cuban doctors in, because they were doing some things that was working. And he mentioned about Florida and the virus hitting Florida, and and it sounded prophetic to me. And I wrote it that way in the article. So anyway, I get a call from him. And he said that, that's not what he was emphasizing in bringing that up like that. He was really talking to the politicians. At that time, there was the national elections was on. There was a presidential race going on. And he said, for whoever will be president, because the politicians have the power to open up, allow, break the embargo down.
Yeah.
Right. And open up the way for the Cuban doctors to come. And he felt that if they can come to Florida and be effective, then it could be like a sign of what they can do for the rest of the country. As you know, how America was hit hard by COVID. And so that was one. He called in that correction of what his aim was. And so as he's talking, we're talking, and then he starts to talk about my writing. And he said, brother, my student ministers and representatives should be able to go into your articles and get the written answer of things that I have said or positions I've taken. And where all they got to do is just take your article and lift the information out and use it. And the reason that's important is because that changed the trajectory of how I write my articles to this day. Because if you notice in all of my articles, I always put something from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on whatever subject I'm writing on.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I can talk to this expert and this analyst and this observer that's giving me maybe sometimes half-baked knowledge or information, then certainly I can get the divine truth that our people will be able to know what is God saying about this situation or that situation.
That's beautiful, and I'm glad that you do that, because just quite frankly, I can remember sometimes reading some articles about national events, and I'm reading in the final call, and we're quoting this person. I said, man, there's no quote from like that the minister said something, not like a up-to-date quote, but it's like nothing was included from a previous lecture, something that the minister said that fits to that. And I think as the Final Call newspaper, we need to do that. And I'm glad that you do that with your writing. And I do notice that with your writing. And that is beautiful. Now, you said something like that. You were on some of the World Friendship Tours?
Well, I was on the third.
Okay,
the last one that he did.
Anything that, because the minister talked about how he wanted those who were able to witness those tours to talk about what they witnessed. What did you witness that you can share?
Man, I can share. Oh man, Brother Willie. Let me put this. Let me start with this from the minister. The minister has done World Friendship Tours. He's done many peace missions, some that the people don't even know about. And I have to say this. There was a president of Zambia who died, former president, Kenneth Kaunda. And on his passing, I was blessed to talk to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to get his, guidance of what he wanted to say about Kenneth Kaunda, because they worked together on some things in Africa. People don't know this. But I'm saying, I'm bringing that up to say this, to your point of the fact that the people have to know the minister's international stature, the Nation of Islam's international stature. Because in that time when I was on the phone with him, he said, call Brother Akbar and go over what I just said in case he remembers it differently. And then he said, if there's some things he remembers differently, then we need to do a three-way, which happened because he did remember some things a little differently, not, details. And so in that three-way call the next day, they get to talking. Now I'm like a fly on the wall, if I could describe myself like that.
Person in the room.
Exactly. They and they start talking, they start reminiscing details of these trips. A couple of them I were on, and I didn't know, because when again, we're soldiers, so a lot of times we're on these trips, we're handling what we're handling. We're not really paying attention to the history making part of it, certainly. And we're not really paying attention to all of the little things that may be going on that we just not privy to, even though we're there. So they get to talking. And I'm like, man, and then the minister, then he said, well, Brother Brian, did we been here long enough? I said, yeah, yes, sir. I couldn't stop him, and I couldn't, even though I was on a deadline for what we were on the call for. But in that conversation, the minister said to me and Brother Akbar, he said the believers have to know. He said the believers have to know the stature of the Nation of Islam international work. And he said we need to write about it. And it started to sound like he wanted me to kind of add some of that to what we were working on, which I knew would have been real difficult. So I did was like, well, Brother Minister, that sounds like maybe a series, or it sounds like another article. He said we could do a series of articles. And he's like, and so, but my point is the people have to know. So to answer your question, yes, there were a lot of experiences that I've experienced with the minister, along with others who were on those trips. But the spirit of the minister, none of that clouded his mind or changed him one iota from the man of humility that we know. Because the underpinning of all of his international work and the great things, and he's been received as head of state. He wasn't some little black leader traveling around the world and trying to get in this door and that door. Doors were being opened for him. And so the underpinning comes out of the Holy Quran, Brother Willie. And seek no favors. Do no favors seeking gain. And that's what I saw him, no matter where we were at around the world. When he met with the Abona Sheikh in Medina.
You were there?
Oh, yes, sir.
Brother Brian, I'll tell you what we're going to have to do. I'm going to need you to sit down and think about all of those things, and we got to come back and we got to get it, because we have to get this. So tell me about the Abona Sheikh. What did you witness, stuff that other than what we've heard already? Because I know that you had a view in what you've seen as well.
Yeah. Well, I did not know the magnitude of who he was. I knew it was special because when we got there, at first he stayed in this upper room in the building. I guess this is where he lived, and so we went up, we we met him, and then we were dismissed. I'm not sure exactly who, if anybody, stayed up in the room as he met with the minister, as you saw that picture of them two together. But I know afterwards, when it was so profound that we got back to the hotel, and the minister didn't go up to his room right away. They sat in this dining area, him, Mother Tainetta, Sheikh Tijani bin Omar, Dr. Aline was sitting there, I think, yeah. And a couple of the sons of the Abona Sheikh. And I wasn't in that conversation. I was there, but I wasn't, they were sitting, together talking. But from what we know, the minister was getting a gauge of what that could have meant. Because he gave him his staff and this, cloak. And they said that they've never seen their father do that for anybody. Now, this is a man that made sheikhs. He's a teacher of sheikhs that are scattered all over the world. He's originally from Sudan, the Abona Sheikh. And, so things of that nature makes you think, because the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was told by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad that Allah went before you and have made friends for you all over the world. And when at the right time, you will meet them. And this is kind of how that trip happened. It unfolded like that. When we were in Russia, and they try to, I know we got time, the time is, but if I can, and and we were in Russia. The minister spoke in Moscow at the Central Mosque of Moscow. And I don't remember all that he said, but I do remember he did mention how they must make Russia a Muslim Russia. And that he's doing the same in the Western Hemisphere, in so many words. Mm-hmm. We can get the recording. The final call has it. You can just call up there and order it. A lot of the talks he did on that World Friendship Tour, that third one, is available now. Mm. So he talked about how he would make America that, but with the word of God. Because remember, a lot of the Muslims that were there in Moscow, and that part were also involved in struggles against Russia. You know, and some of them were engaged in armed struggle, like in Chechnya, and even though Dagestan was still a part of Russia, they were still engaged in this kind of independence kind of move. So the minister said that, and now this went all over all over Russia because it was aired on live TV all over Russia as he was speaking in that mosque that day. Mm. It was for the Eid celebrations because Ramadan had just ended, and we were there, but it was a troublesome spot for our trip, Russia. And then the minister went from Moscow to Siberia. And I just got the recording, I think, for that. But you know, he spoke in Siberia, and I'm ringing up Siberia because what happened was they delayed us for 8 hours.
Damn.
Yeah. So we didn't get, our next stop was Dagestan, but we were delayed. And there was a Russian who he wanted to get a ride on our plane. And Brother Akbar, you know, I mean, Brother Akbar was like really the administrator of the trip. And I remember him telling the man, that, no, you can't get, I mean, who does that? You don't, how do you hitch a ride on somebody's plane? Because we was on a private plane, you know? So he told him no. Well, they took it to the boss. They took it to the minister. And the minister was like, oh, Brother Akbar, let him come.
Wow.
Let him come. So that was different. Because, you know, people just don't do that. I mean.
No, that's right.
I mean, even in today's world, you know, at least back in the day, you could hitchhike on the side of the road and get a ride.
Especially on the airplane. You can do that on a car.
Especially on the airplane. We don't know who you are, where you know. So anyway, we leave Siberia on our way to Dagestan. And this now is in the middle of the night. It may have been, not middle, maybe close to 1 a.m, if not later. And I know I was awake. Brother Akbar was awake. And, you know, the plane, the pilot starts to descend. Then all of a sudden, he picks back up. And that happened a couple of times. So Brother Akbar went up to the cockpit to find out what was going on. And so the pilot said that, well, the coordinates they were given would have put the plane into the mountains. Mm-hmm. Now, you remember former
Ron
Brown got killed in a crash in that area in the Caucasus Mountains.
Wow. In the same area.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He got killed there up in that area. So brother, so he said that, then he said the other problem was that English is the international language for air traffic control. I don't know if people know that.
Mm.
So the people in the tower claim that they didn't speak any English. Our pilot was from Vancouver, Canada, Captain Iqbal, never forget him. And he certainly speaks English, right? So then Brother Akbar remembered that we had this Russian on the back of the plane, that hitched the ride, that the minister allowed to come on, which is, again, unprecedented kind of move. But at this point, now that you think back on it, that was a divine move.
Mm-hmm.
So Brother Akbar went to the back of the plane and got the Russian and brought him up to the cockpit. And he spoke to them in Russian. Yeah. Now, we didn't have that man on the plane. I mean, I believe Allah would have still, I don't think Allah would have allowed his man to go out like that, but that's the way Allah played it.
Mm.
He put that man on the plane who for all intents and purposes, was an angel as far as I was concerned.
Mm.
Because if he was not on the plane, then we, that what they were trying to do,
Trying to take us out.
Yeah.
Man, brother, because I gotta, we over time, the normally not number, but listen, I'm gonna give you a call. We're gonna have to do a part 2 of this, and I'll explain to you why. Is because when I first started this program, we weren't doing it online. COVID Trent got it where we started doing it online, but we were doing it in our mosque, right? And the purpose of this is to get this testimony. And because there are people that have seen stuff like what you just saw, like you, for me, I don't think I've heard anybody else tell that story about what happened on the plane outside the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Now other people might have said it, but not in conversations, but for you to say that, and listen to you, you're a natural historian. I know that there's more. So we're gonna talk, man. We're gonna schedule part 2. We gotta get all of this out because it's history, brother.
We do, and I'm sorry that I didn't spend more time speaking about our brother Akbar.
Listen. That's why it is part 2 and whatever. We're gonna get all that out. What needed to be said. You know what I'm saying? And you shared what you shared was definitely on point. And there's more. That's because one of the things when we're doing these interviews, it's just like I didn't send you questions in advance. We're just talking, right? But we'll get together. And I want to tell, hey, what about this? And give you some ideas, and he'll come up and we'll do it. But this is beautiful, man. And I thank you for what you shared thus far about how you came to Islam, the guidance that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. That was a nugget, because even with student ministers, how many student ministers know? We didn't know that the minister told you that we should be able to do, because honestly, most people think most student ministers think as it relates to the final call, where you go in to get that is the minister's article.
Right, yeah.
It's the Most Akbar Muhammad's article. Yeah. But here the minister, you say the paper is the best minister. Here's why. You have current news, national news, international news, all of these different perspectives of different people, but then also words of the man of God, his teacher, and him.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure the public be wondering. And the public be wondering, man, why he keep putting, well, I have to. No, because I'm not going, and again, I speak to some great voices on, who do know what they're talking about with, but you can get that from the New York Times, the Washington Post, whatever local paper. You can get the who, the what, and the where. That's easy. But now what does Allah have to say?
And oftentimes that's what people want to know. Like, man, what the minister's saying. Like, I was just at a barbershop, bro. Like, hey man, tell me about this war. I sent them some clips of lectures by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So I thank you for doing that. But this interview brought that out. So inshallah, we'll talk, and we're gonna schedule when you see what your schedule is in mind, and we're gonna do this again because it's needed, bro. But thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you for what you're doing with the Final Call newspaper as well.
Thank you.
So
sir. Bless you.
yes, sir. And for those people that are watching, we thank you all for tuning in. And you heard our brother share what he shared, and we thank you for tuning in. We will, inshallah, definitely have part 2, and we're going to be back to hear more. But just what he shared about, people say stuff like the ministers are aging as the government ain't trying to kill him. That was an international attempt on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's life, and our brother was here able to share that. So this is your brother Willie Muhammad. Make sure you hit like, make sure you hit share, leave your comments, and stay tuned for the part 2 of this. All right. Thank you, and may Allah continue to bless each and every one of you all. Assalamu alaikum.
God came to us to seek and to save that which was lost. He raised a man from among us. He, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, laid the foundation. What I'm doing is something that comes from him through me, and the thing that he uses in me to do the work is my faith in him and the word that he taught. To produce men and women who wanted to clean up their life and build an independent nation for the glory of God.